Hello, my fellow comic book collectors. Today, I'm going to be looking at a very specific book and the influence it had on comics in general. I mentioned this book as being one of four books that I really believe led to the Comic Code Authority. This book was directly mentioned within the Senate hearings that led to directly led to the Comic Code Authority, and it is Reader's Digest from June 1954. This is a major book that most people don't even realize how important or significant this book is. And it's a book that you can pick up very, very cheaply. These Reader's Digest books are fairly common. They were mass printed, so you can see the back as well. Just show the back. I don't know why I'm showing both sides, but just to give you a sense of what it looked like. Um, they weren't the prettiest of books. It's like the back is not too bad, but the cover of these Reader's Digest was pretty plain. It'd basically be a table of contents and the date at the very top. So June 1954. So you probably wonder what's so significant about this book. Well, this book featured prominently in the Senate hearings. And basically, it was because of an article that was written inside. And it was called For the Kiddies to Read. And I'll zoom in so you can see that. I believe it's the second or third article. Yeah, second article. For the kiddies, no, sorry. Yeah, For the Kiddies to Read. So I'm going to read a little bit of that uh, article to you. It's a 4-page article, so I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'll read the kind of the key points from it. So yeah, so here's the article. I'm gonna try to do it. It's a little bit this book for the kiddies to read. Okay, and it's by T.E. Murphy. It began last December when a neighbor's child left a couple of comic books at our house. I picked them up casually and began rifling through the pages. I have not been more startled than if I stepped accidentally into a pair of king cobras. That's how it starts. So it's like really, he really sees that these comics are like surprising or shocking. The comic books were loaded with the most depraved practical pictorial material I've ever seen. Surely these are not sold in my town, I said unbelievably, to our children. It's like really, really playing on those. Like, you got to imagine that a lot of people that would read this would be either housewives or like, so playing up on that sympathy that these are books, these are things that are attacking your children. You've got to do something about it. So, he's really playing that up. They were. At the corner drugstore, I found counterparts of these 2 crime comics and dozens more that contained equal amount of sewage. I said to the druggist, "Do you know what kind of filth you are selling to the children?" He gestured unhappily. "I don't have the time to read them," he said. And so this is the kind of stuff that I should read the whole article. It is very interesting article, but I'll kind of get into what he describes of the comics themselves, the ones that he specifically mentions, and there's really just 2 that he kind of gets into. Here, okay, let me just start with the beginning of it. We cannot be appalled at cannibalism spelled out to the last bloody detail. What can shock us? In the day in, day out delineation of the subject fit for small children. So he was really upset that one of the books that he picked up was related to cannibalism. It featured cannibalism. Here in a 10-cent book is a dining room table in which lies half-eaten human carcass. Here is a half-draped woman, breasts, legs emphasized as usual. And leaning over her is her crone with a cleaver saying that she can hardly wait for the nice, soft, white flesh. Here is the cover showing a monster telephoning room service and asking for a bellboy to be sent up. No, not food, he emphasizes, but the boy. He's hungry. Okay? And I'll show you what that book is. This is it's a funny thing because it's a comedy book. It's a parody book. It's Crazy number 5. You can see he's calling up for the bellboy. And I'll read it. Hello, room service. I'm hungry. Send up a bellboy. What? No, never. What? No, never mind the food. Just send me a bellboy. Okay, so he's going to eat the bellboy. So he was really upset by this book, by the cannibalism. And it is one that was targeted towards kids. It's definitely targeted towards kids. It's definitely one that features cannibalism. And it is one that he felt was just too extreme, too gory, too violent for kids. And it's a comedy book, actually. It's like a parody book, strangely enough. So that's one of the ones that's featured. And I'll read about the other one. Where was it? Okay, here's the other book that was mentioned. Here are some sample run-of-the-mill plots. Lucy is 10 years old in 4th grade. Her parents are not good to her, and she would prefer to live with her aunt in a nicer house. Her chance comes when her mother, Miss Johnson, starts to elope with a lover. When the two are confronted by Mr. Johnson, they emerge from the house, bags packed. Lucy is watching from a second-story window, picks off her daddy with a .32, and the lover runs, whereupon Lucy places the gun in her fainting mummy's hand. Mummy and her lover are later seen in the electric chair. Okay? So basically, it's like a girl shooting her father with a 32. And it's sort of that extreme violence from a young child in the comic. And that comic is Shock Suspense Stories. So this is the comic that they're referring to. Where this is a different cover, different than the story that I mentioned, the cover. But it is one where there is that story mentioned. And it's from 1954. So this one was mentioned in the Senate hearings, because it was so extreme. And the story is of a child doing this crime. And that's really what bothered the guy from the Reader's Digest the most. That, not only is it kind of geared at children in general, like the crime story, but the crime itself involves a child doing the crime and killing their parents, which is pretty extreme. So that Shock Suspense Stories number 14. It seems like Shock Suspense Stories, in terms of both Seduction and Innocent and this Reader's Digest, was mentioned quite a lot. But what really makes this book different than Seduction and Innocent or some of the other ones that were related to the Senate hearings was the fact that it takes an advocate role. And I'll give you an example. I'll read further on here. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The wholesale dealers sent notices to retailers to return all the books they considered bad. We kept the crusade going with other news stories and editorials. And in the days that followed, the concurrent was able to print headlines like these, referring to encouragingly to our surrounding area. Board of Education and others join fight on comics. Headham Story stop Hayden stores stop sale of horror comic books. VFW in 30 towns backs fight on comic menace. Salisbury, KC cleans up comics in 7 towns. New Britain Comics drive begins. Okay, so basically, he takes an advocate role. He really tries to promote the idea that you got to do something, take action, get these books burned or banned, or complain basically. And that is what's different about this compared to Wortham's book. Wortham's book, Seduction, isn't. He takes sort of like, yes, these are having an influence on your children, and maybe they should be banned or maybe should be, considered, but he doesn't out and out say, go out and ban the books, go out and burn them all. He doesn't take that kind of advocate role in Seduction Innocent. It's only this article that really advocates for the end of comics and for people to be active in that, making sure that comics are no longer. And I'll just read the final paragraph to kind of emphasize that. Any community that can, any community can clean up crime comic situation if a few responsible people will set themselves to the task. To rail against comic books in general serves no useful purpose. If you have to do something about the filthy books in particular, your hometown newspaper can do the job if you will pitch in and help. Give people the specifications as we have done in Hartford, and the people react as they always do on the side of good. So if you don't react, like basically, if you don't advocate for the end of comics, if you don't go out and get your, piece published in your local newspaper banning comics or asking for the banning of comics, then you're not on the side of good. Basically, this is the kind of thinking that people do, where they, it's kind of like a hysterical thinking. And I've seen this with a lot of, like, some of the movements that we see in our society today, where if you're not against us, you're on the side of evil. And it's only us that have that moral authority, that the people that follow what we're doing are the only good ones. And they really play on that whole idea that if you don't believe what we believe, you are a bad person. And I see it with these kind of, I want to say left-leaning groups where they do promote censorship. And you got to be we have to be careful whenever people advocate for this kind of censorship or hysteria with anything. And I see it, in our society in general, with climate crisis or COVID crisis or whatever crisis, that if you don't agree with whatever they pitch, then you are somehow wrong. They always talk about consensus. And that's something, whenever you hear a consensus, especially if it's a scientific consensus, then it's not based on science or based on logic. It's based on a religion. It's almost a religious belief. And that is something we got to be very, 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 very cautious of. Always consider what is the truth behind this? What is the basis for their opinion? Maybe comics had a negative influence. I don't think so. I think kids know the difference. It's sort of like, at the time in the 50s, it was comics. Later on, it became video games or television. There's always going to be something that they say will have a negative influence on people. But we have to trust in our children and be people that actually educate our children in a way that they can look at these things with an objective viewpoint. If kids are taught that, they're just at the whim of whatever influence that they are, and you don't educate them on, some moral framework to work with, well, yeah, maybe they can. Maybe comics or television or video games can have a negative influence, but you have to be an active participant in your child's development, and you know, I, balance it out. Is my point. Not that I'm the greatest parent in the world, but I feel like, kids are smart enough to know the difference between a story that they read in comics or a video game that they play than and reality. They're smart enough, most of them, I would say. And we got to let kids kind of work it out on their own sometimes too. So that's just been my opinion. What do you think? Do you think crazy number 5 with eating a bellboy, or shock suspense number 14, where it's a little girl shooting her father, are really that bad? Um, what books do you think are negative influences on kids, or what books maybe are positive influences on kids? I'd love to hear your feedback. Please leave the comment below, and remember to like and subscribe to my channel. Thanks.